Welcome to Playthink, conversations about games, interactivity, art, and culture. This podcast is recorded live at the USC Game Innovation Lab, which is part of the USC Games program at the University of Southern California. For more information, follow us on Twitter at USC Game Lab or visit our website at gameinnovationlab.com/playthink.
Thank you all for coming today. Welcome to Playthink. Today we'll be speaking with Adam Badawy. Adam is I have a bio here, which I will read. Adam Badawy is a computational social scientist and a PhD candidate in the Political Science Department and Information Sciences Institute, ISI, at the University of Southern California. Working with the Machine Intelligence and Data Science Lab, Adam uses machine learning, network analysis, and natural language processing to study and measure malicious activities and political behavior on online social networks. His latest research on the political misinformation campaign during the 2016 US presidential elections has been covered widely by various news outlets, including MIT Technology Review, Vox, and PBS NewsHour. So welcome, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And I am Jeff Watson. I'm an assistant professor here in the Interactive Media and Games division of the USC School of Cinematic Arts. And I'm really interested in the ways that the technologies that we use to structure play give rise to all manner of performance. And often the kinds of performances that are given rise to by a technology of play, are predicted by the people who designed the technology, and sometimes they're very sort of unpredictable surprises. So I want to get to talking to your work and how it might connect to that sort of idea, but maybe if you could give us just a little bit of background how you ended up doing this kind of work in the first place. What was your sort of trajectory into this research?
Sure. So my trajectory was a little bit kind of like unexpected. So before the PhD, I was supposedly going to be like a government person. I was working in Egypt for the US Embassy, and before that, the Egyptian Revolution happened. And I think I was like telling you before that, one of the reasons why I went on the street to kind of like, join the protest was that they basically stopped all internet in the country. So there was no way to kind of like talk to each other. So it's like, why not just go down and see what's happening, like, the old way. So from that point onwards, I was interested in social movement overall. Social movement took over the Middle East, and I got interested in the subject. And my first job, I've ended up not working for government. My first job pre-PhD was at Google, trying to kind of like, place ads next to content, stuff like that. So I got a little exposure to machine learning overall and how to kind of like, try to classify content and things of the sort. So when I started the PhD, I was like, I'm going to work on social movements. And started working on like, ISIS a little bit, although it's not a social movement, but kind of like, how to spread content on Twitter or Facebook. And then I got to like election and things of the sort. So it started with spread information related to social movement, but went to elections and other political kind of phenomena.
Well, as you undoubtedly have noticed by all the toys that are around here, like you're in a place of play and entertainment. I think it's interesting that some of those formative moments for you were, one around the Google stuff and sort of marketing, and then also thinking about, I've read some of your work on ISIS, which you just mentioned, and some of the ways that you talk about that was the ways that ISIS, part of what made them a successful operation on social media was the kind of spectacular, bordering on kind of entertaining, but in the darkest imaginable way, material that they use. So could you talk a little bit about the role of entertainment and spectacle in these kinds of social movements and how they unfold online?
Actually, regards to ISIS, kind of like the role of play is actually pretty big. When you compare ISIS to Al-Qaeda, when Al-Qaeda recruits and tries to put things online, it's like in websites, it's like Web 1.0, it's like, it's lengthy, it's like, just like talks on and on about theology and doctrines and things of the sort.
Right.
ISIS comes into play and puts a lot of kind of like, between quotes, interesting videos of like, young men doing like action in foreign countries or, conquering like a new city. or like things like spoils and war, things of the sort. So for a lot of people who would be interested into this, just way more action oriented, didn't focus a lot on like why we're doing these things of the sort, but kind of like come here and you'll have fun. So again, in a very negative way, but
Yeah.
but yes, there's a difference in kind of how they display the message online. So.
Do you think there's something inherent to social media that makes messaging like that, more kind of spectacular, fun, sticky kind of images, move faster? Like something inherent to the medium, that maybe that was the secret that ISIS unlocked was, oh, hey, this is what works really great in this context? And are there parallels to some of the stuff we've seen more recently?
Definitely, like basically more emotionally invested kind of message. So if you're gonna talk about, oh, this happened, but this did not happen, or like in an even way, that's not like the most likely message to kind of like spread across the network. Sometimes positive emotion can, make a message more likely to spread, but a lot of times it is negative emotion. Negative emotion helps messages to spread across a network. So in this regard, yes, they're definitely usually more emotionally intensive and a lot of times more negative.
Yeah. Another big piece, obviously, that sort of pairs with this sort of spectacular and emotional content end of it is the algorithmic end of it. Was ISIS using algorithms and using machine learning or anything like that, or were they more sort of riding on top of the system as it existed?
Like you don't need to use kind of like a machine learning algorithm, but they're doing a lot of like hashtag play. So they know when to post, which hashtag be used, which hashtags in which countries we kind of like will pop up and become like the most kind of like retweeted or most like viral. So there's a lot of play into that, and people know it, and they use kind of like the hashtags that will get embedded within a certain conversation, even if it's not like super related. So that was definitely happening.
And it seems like a sort of another example of asymmetric warfare, where a relatively modest investment can have huge payoffs. Could you speak a little bit about the sort of the size of the sorts of online operations that you observed ISIS using? And then maybe also talk about how those compare in scale to some of the stuff you observed in the 2016 election that came from the Russian intelligence services.
So, to be very frank, it's kind of hard to talk about like the whole activity of ISIS because like as researchers we get a glimpse of what's happening. So like my data said it was like around like 2 million tweets from like ISIS members. I'm pretty sure that's a small fraction of what was happening. And for like the trolls, we had like with the people who spread them and things, the sort was few millions. The whole death was 43 million. But again, that was like a small kind of like percentage of what's happening. But in terms of like investment versus like what you get, it's like the price tag that was given to the tweets that was like kind of like put onwards by the IRA or like the basically the Russian side was like 100-something thousand, but was like basically shown to more than 100 million people. So whether this had like the effect that people talk about on the media or not is debatable. But in terms of like how many times it has shown for the money you put in, it's a good bargain.
Yeah, it seems to me like some of the roots of this go back to like late 1990s sort of viral marketing and that sort of like dawn of like astroturfing, stealth marketing, using mystery and this sort of feeling of grassrootsness to get something to spread. Have you dwelled much on? You mentioned you worked at Google for a time, but have you? Do you have a background in entertainment or in advertising that sort of informs this? Because a lot of it seems like it's the similar stuff. For me, one of the touchstones is alternate reality games of the early 2000s, right? They were really pioneering things like using sock puppet characters, creating these sort of fake personalities, putting them online, not marking them as fake, and using that to drive interest and performance through into the game system. So I'm interested if there are any threads that you've uncovered that sort of link back out to those kinds of operations. It's clear, we could talk about like connections to, thinking on propaganda or something like that as a military operation. But it seems like there's a lot that's sort of almost been poached right out of entertainment practice.
I would say it's kind of like actually close to what you're describing in terms of like marketing strategies. And in the days, the more kind of like a little bit like absurd, you use the images or the stories that you put out there, the more actually, they thought actually going to get a lot of attraction. And to be frank, it got more attraction on one side versus another. So when you see actually like, particularly with the US election case, there was actually content that was pushed towards both the conservative side and the liberal side. So it was on both sides. And on the conservative side, again, the certain grievances that a lot of conservatives would have regarding the mass media or the government, things of the sort. And on the liberal side, it was like, Black Lives Matter, things of the sort. But it happened that on one side, it got really spread way more. Definitely the production toward conservative was more, but the spread on one side was way more than, I think they even expected.
Right.
So, and a lot of it was like just false stories. So, but the more absurd, the more some people liked it. So
strangely, the more traction some of the stories would get. Yeah. Another huge piece of this, obviously, and your work addresses this directly in many cases, is the use of bots and networks of bots. Can you tell me about the sort of first encounters you had with that, how far back that practice goes? Because I think we're all familiar that stuff with bots has happened and is happening now. But is there sort of a deeper history to that you could share?
Well, bots have been used. The thing is, like, bots have been used for years now for like many applications, and I feel people don't realize that we interact with bots all the time. So like the news accounts I get is like the news pieces that you see on Facebook or Twitter. A lot of it was posted by bots that's working, let's say, for New York Times or was working for Washington Post. So I've been dealing with bots all the time, but like bots for like this kind of malicious activity, I'll say it's a little bit on the newer side. Like a few years back, you saw this was like the Brexit. You have seen now was like a lot of elections across the globe, from Korea to Brazil to Russia in Russia itself, Russia in Eastern Europe, China in China. Not with elections though. So the usage of this like for political purposes have been a little bit recent. But the use of bots for all sorts of purposes have been going on for years now.
Yeah. I think in one of your papers you mentioned the Chinese, what are they called, the 50 centers?
50 centers.
Yeah, could you just sort of share what they are?
These are not like really bots. A lot of them are just normal human being. And they're basically, since they're cheap enough, you can hire like an army of people who will like post against people that are against the government. And you have seen this, basically it was like the kind of like the cheap option, although China now definitely uses a lot more sophisticated ways. But like we now have seen it in Egypt and in Turkey, you got a lot of people, their sole job is to troll, to harass people who are against the government. And they do this on a daily basis, and you can even sometimes pinpoint IP addresses where they're staying and doing this. But with China, it was like on a massive level that all of it was just government employees. So you work your normal day and you do this for like an hour or two. So.
Really interesting. So part of your work has been to identify bots and also identify individuals that are, or at least accounts that are most likely to be the accounts that are going to spread misinformation once it's sort of left its home or it's been injected into the system by a troll or a bot. And you've been using machine learning techniques to do that. So without going into the full detail of a very complex set of experiments, could you maybe just sort of outline the recent work that you've done around the 2016 election in that regard in terms of identifying things?
Sure. So for trolls, so we started with accounts that was posted by Congress and Twitter overall, the list of like troll accounts. But from there onwards, we kind of like we basically specified the users that retweeted trolls to kind of spread the message. But to be frank, it's not kind of like trolls just send or like produce messages for spreaders. It's an ongoing game. So like trolls will produce stuff, they will retweet it by the spreaders, but the trolls will spread the trolls will retweet the spreaders all the time actually. So they're kind of like helping each other. I would not be even surprised if some of the spreaders that we say are spreaders are actually kind of like Russian trolls that would not have been like, already kind of like caught by Twitter or like, published basically by the congressional hearings. So it's kind of like an interplay. But in terms of how particularly we caught like bots. So with bots, I think one of my co-authors and my advisor, Emilio Ferrara, was working in this massive project. So it's a software that basically captures a lot of information about these users, like who's the contact, what kind of messages, what kind of emotions are in the messages, how old is the account, how many followers account. So they use all this information, and they have like a golden data set of users that are bots. And from there onwards, it will see which users are similar to bots on these set of features and will give a score, like a belief on like if this account is a bot or not. It's now like 1.6 thousand features, so it's a lot of features. Because to be frank with like bots in terms of many of these users, you cannot actually know if they're a bot or not just from the message. Because the message can be very similar to a normal user. You have to analyze like the network's dynamics. You have to analyze, the metadata about the user to actually get a sense if that user is an automated account or not. Because also a lot of bots also retweet normal accounts. So through the message alone, the message is by a human being. It's a retweet. So
you look for things like timing intervals between.
Yeah, timing intervals is one of the big things for sure. There are definitely like bots that like, these are not really smart ones that like just retweeting all day long. No human being can be retweeting that many numbers across
24/7.
These are not smart bots, but there are definitely smart bots that can mimic human behavior. And more, they are in the minority now, but the future is they're not going to be in the minority. Like definitely if you are like a bot researcher and want to move on the other side, there's a lot of field like techniques that you'll do on like how to make kind of bots really mimic human behavior. As of right now, a lot of them are on the cheap side, just bots that just retweet. So these are not very smart, but they're in the majority now.
Yeah, so we were talking about this a few minutes ago. It seems like then we are kind of in this like endless arms race, where as we develop better techniques for detecting bots, the bot makers develop better techniques for concealing them. So what does it all look like in a few years? Do we have filters on our Twitter accounts that notify us that, this is a suspected bot or something like that? What's your sort of vision for how some of this gets mitigated, aside from just sort of these, detection operations, which sometimes, or at least now, seem to come kind of after the fact and maybe not in a timely enough fashion to intervene?
So kind of like three comments here.
Yeah, okay, good.
So I feel like there's kind of like two types of kind of like stopping this kind of content. So there's on one hand the kind of like, that explicitly calls for violence or hate speech and things of the sort. They're still not super easy to detect, but I feel they're getting easier to detect. For these kind of accounts, this kind of message, kind of like they're companies and a lot of people are leaning toward just like blocking the message, then maybe blocking the account. But then you have a whole gray area where there's implicitly you have hate speech or implicitly you have like calls for violence. What do you do about those? And there's like two dimensions to this. There's one, it's hard technically because like if you cannot like actually read the message and say, hey, this is violent or not, it's actually hard to train the machine for it if you as a human being cannot do so. And then the second point, just kind of like, do you want to give that power to a company? Do you want to give that power to a government? Or where would we gonna put the line where, okay, you have the right to say this, even if it's like in this gray area of maybe relating to violence or things of the sort. So that's like kind of like another problem that we have. Third one, yes, like I definitely, the way I see it basically developments, like when I was talking to you, that like it's kind of like cybersecurity in a way. We gonna block some probably, we're gonna have like certain like links to like right information, but it's gonna be an ongoing battle. On the other side, you definitely know what companies are doing, know what we're doing, and the update. So it strikes me that that there's this effort to mitigate
the actions of malicious actors by these various methods, this kind of ongoing, never-ending battle, really. Another piece of it that occurs to me, I was reading a history of Nazi Germany a while ago, and one of the things that happened sort of in the lead up, but as we were approaching the election of Hitler in 1933, that the remnants of the democracy there sought to band together eventually and try to find ways to actually counter an issue, to deliver counter propaganda against the Nazis in an organized way. But it was too late. By the time they got it together, it was the tide had turned and they were sort of swept away. So is there a spot, and this sort of goes back to bots, is there a spot for kind of like counter botnets? Do you see anything like that going? Or is it just too late? Has the ship sailed in a way on this tactic? Yeah.
I don't think the ship has sailed. There actually have been like an interesting experiment done actually by a political scientist at NYU, where he created his own bots, and he had like 4 different type of bots. One that basically white avatar, like a white person, who had like a lot of followers. He bought the followers, by the way. And one, you can buy followers at a very cheap price. And one was
like how much? How much is like 1,000 followers?
Like a few cents per per bot. So.
Few cents per follower. That's a great deal.
Yeah, that's cheap.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
So yeah. Well, it depends also how sophisticated you want
right,
the are. But if you want like
they're all just eggs.
Out of the mill, I was like, a few cents. Yeah. So and like a white person was like low followers, a black person was high followers, and a black person was low followers. And he tried to do an intervention. So basically, you get these accounts, normal human beings, users, but he only included white male users. And if a white male user posts something that's racist or misogynist or violent, he will counter that. He will send them a message saying that, like, hey man, this what you have done is not cool, and things of the sort. So the result of this experiment was very interesting. So when another white person with a lot of followers send this kind of message, actually that user stops posting racist or basically like bad material overall. But when an African American person sends the same message, it's actually like the opposite reaction. So that person just goes on stories and just like keep posting this kind of material. So kind of like a little bit, there have been actually few experiments trying to do this sort of thing. And it's like they're showing mixed results. Mm-hmm. So it's like certain in-groups definitely, kind of like in-group effect was kind of high. Out-group was definitely low. Mm-hmm. So if you're from the opposite side, if you're like Republican trying to influence people to do something, you might get something. If you're a Democrat trying to and the other way around, it's just like you might get actually like an opposite effect. So that's why like there's a lot of kind of like push for intervention. Intervention may work, but it's also like kind of subtle and nuanced in a way that it's just not like a blanket kind of intervention. I feel may not work.
Yeah, and you never know what the sort of unintended consequences of an intervention might be.
And there's also kind of like they just change medium. So if you block, there's also kind of thing like if you block everybody from like a certain group within like a certain medium, like you're just gonna go to a different one. Except if you block them from every medium out there, which is I'm not sure we have the ability as of right now, except if you're in China, to like do something like that. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, so I have a few more questions, but I thought we might as well open it up to the room at this point. I can keep filling in with questions, but I'm sure there are some questions in the audience, and it'd be great to get you all involved. Anyone have a question?
Yeah. So recently there was the incident that got revealed at USC about one of the people who worked on the Charlottesville protests. And so we saw a huge backlash on Twitter of how like they actively expose their name and like all their identification info. So would you say that's an effective or ineffective way of stopping like trolling and botting? If you can actually like identify, oh, this person's like a troll or a bot, or do you think that's like more harmful than beneficial, as that's also a form of like doxing a person? Just like when we consider doxing, we usually consider it like conservative attack, but in this sense, it's more of like a liberal attack too.
You think I'm not sure, but like to be like the problem with this kind of strategy that let's say for example you expose somebody and you put this picture out there and things of the sort, and like there's like violence, let's say, inflicted upon that person. Would this be good for the cause or bad for the cause? So there's I'm like very conflicted about like the strategy overall. Like on one hand, if you do something bad, then like you should be exposed for it. But on the other hand, if basically you are, you know, if something happened to like such a person and is basically kind of like, you know, producing bad media or like, you know, bad coverage overall on the liberal cause, is this serving the liberal cause or not? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I would not have recommended, but again, I don't have a strong opinion. And definitely don't have like data-driven kind of opinion on this.
So I'm interested in what you might think about the role of education in terms of, you know, people using Twitter. Are there ways to become kind of aware of like abilities to recognize bots? You know, will it be helpful for us to become more critical users in order to recognize these kinds of nefarious forces, or do you think that the analysis that you're doing can it be complemented in some way by educating people what to look for?
So I actually have two comments regarding this. I was asked this question before, and one is like when I actually look at like accounts that I don't know, I actually go back and look at like, but that's, you know, me is like look at like number of followers and I look at their feed. If, you know, if there's something fishy about that account. But again, trying to tell people it's like, hey, when you look, you know, at something that like, you know, an account that you don't know, you should like, you know, kind of like see what this account has been doing. I would say it's kind of hard. So like, you know, the other kind of advice I give people, try to see if this news has been covered by like mainstream media. This would be my advice. But like, I'm, you know, kind of like sorry to say that like in certain kind of communities, this mainstream media has been giving this label of being, you know, very kind of like, you know, has certain attitudes and like part of a certain camp. So this advice doesn't kind of like work for them in a way. But at least for me, I sometimes, if I'm not sure if something happened, particularly with pictures, you can do all crazy kind of fake pictures right now that fools me myself when I look at these pictures that I have like, you know, see is like, okay, have this been like, is this in the mainstream media? Does it show up?
Yeah.
So that's usually my way of, you know, trying to track something.
Yeah, so encouraging people to go that extra mile and actually
Yeah.
investigate the source of this information. But in many cases, you're not going to have people who are inclined to do so.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it serves them maybe on some level to take the bot at face value.
Yeah, and that's why like Facebook, for example, now have like all of like the I one, if like really making it easier for you to kind of like, hey, I'm trying to kind of like, okay, mainstream media has been like, you know, mainstream media kind of link to that story. So that's kind of been like done right now. But are you gonna look at the I icon? I'm not sure. And again, for certain people, like these efforts are also seen as like liberal kind of, you know, efforts to give actually false information.
Right.
Which, yeah. So.
Yeah, I was going to say that technique of kind of being, you know, aware of the source, or maybe more of questioning the source, has also been used to promote conspiracy theories, like, you know, paid actors who, right? Like, what do they call them? Distress actors or something? Or like, right? That wasn't real. That
Crisis actors.
Crisis actors,
Yeah.
yeah. I was gonna say it's like crisis
right,
actors,
yeah.
Yeah, right? So, yeah, there again, it's like...
Yeah, definitely there is like, you know, like from the other side, they are producing stuff that like, hey, we have videos, we have YouTube channels or like YouTube videos showing all sorts of stuff. That's why I was saying like, you know, mainstream media like as like ones that you kind of like know that will not have like, you know, just like straightforward like fake news. But again, in the US right now, we don't agree on what is mainstream media anymore. So that's becoming harder and harder. So like again, if you know, when you read one of my papers, when you look at like the top URLs being shared in the 2016 election from like certified, you thought Breitbart as like one of the top URLs, like top 5. And like, unlike straightforward, I would say, fake news spreaders, like outlets, and the top 5 of URLs being used millions of times in just my data set. So let alone, and they were seeing this actually, but didn't suspect that was happening in a lot of like Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. And what do you do about that? And just like, this became the mainstream news. So like my advice would, they are the mainstream news for certain people. So that definitely is quite problematic.
I mean, oh yeah, go ahead.
I also wanted to follow up on your question that I feel maybe also a psychological effect of confirmation bias plays a big role. It's like if I see the information that already confirms my beliefs, I'm not even motivated, I guess, to go and see if the source is credible or not. But if I see something that I find, suspicious or that just contrary to my beliefs, then I will go and investigate. But otherwise, I'm just not motivated.
There's a PhD student in political science. She works in political psychology, so she knows a lot about this.
One of the things I find, go ahead.
Yeah, just because something is unappealing to you, because we all have a side that we're on. There's very few of us that are entirely neutral, although there are some of us that come close to it. No one is really neutral. And the fact that something is unappealing to you, and that I don't mean to you, but I'm talking to the room in general, and it's not widely carried by mainstream media, and it's carried by the other side that you don't like, doesn't make it false. So, for example, you could be pro-refugee, pro-immigration, and that sort of thing. You could be against the fact that Italy is blocking boats from crossing the Mediterranean, or that Sweden might begin to restrict stuff. So when you see a report come out of the general European community that says young German woman killed, 3 suspects rounded up, they could either be like born in Germany, so legitimate German citizens, but Afghani descent or something like that, or it could say recent arrivals from Ethiopia who have requested but have been denied asylum but have not yet been deported or something. So if you are left-leaning and pro-immigrant, you may find this distasteful, and you may see it as right-wingers attempting to rouse up anti-immigrant sentiments. The question is more like, is it actually true? Did these people get arrested? Are they as described? Are they the nationals from the countries described? Did the incident occur? Did it occur where they said it occurred? Is this a pattern, or is this a single thing that rarely happens and people are trying to make currency out of something that's rare? And a lot of times I'll start searching in different languages. Has it turned up in, maybe it's not being covered here in English, but maybe it's being covered in Amsterdam, or maybe it's being covered in Hungary or something, and you don't like Hungary, but that doesn't mean it's not true. And then finally you search like 15 pages deep and you find the police report, or you find that the Washington Post may have covered it, but only one paragraph, and they may have tweeted it out at 3 o'clock in the morning New York time and never retweeted it. Like the things that they want the American audience to see, they'll put it on an automatic retweet so it comes out every 90 minutes or every 2 hours. They used to say in case you missed it, but now you just refresh the tweet. If it's something they don't want their audience to see, but they don't want to be accused of not covering at all, it'll be tweeted out at an awkward hour and never retweeted again. That's the end of it.
And and I think this goes to the point that it's very time consuming, and it's a high bar for many users to do this kind of delving into what's fact, what's fiction, what part of this is made up, what part of this is spin. To me, I feel like we could imagine Twitter or Facebook being thoroughly modified to make that easier and faster, But it also seems to me that part of what makes these services work is the speed of the experience, that you can dip into it really quickly while you're standing in line at the coffee shop. Like, in a way, it's almost meant for a very superficial experience of the world and experience of news. And so we could imagine the companies changing to obviate that. But then I feel like they might be replaced by other companies that give us that sort of speedy experience. So this is the question I would put to you around all of this is, what is there a role here that should be properly played by government that is not being played by government to do a kind of institutional oversight over these different services? And is that even possible? And in lieu of that, what sorts of directions should we be looking in for some kind of regulation almost? I think of like the fairness doctrine in broadcast that ended in the 1980s that sort of mandated a kind of like perspective on truth telling in broadcast media. But is anything like that possible on the horizon anywhere aside from China?
So I have a few comments also, a comment regarding your question. I feel there are calls for government that actually come in and intervene. And I think regulation for a lot of aspects of the internet will happen. But
Did you say will or won't?
well, but besides kind of like, and actually this goes a little bit to your point, besides coming in and trying to basically stop what would you perceive as just like an obvious kind of like incorrect information, like a fake image or a fake story, it becomes very hard to do anything because like if let's say you have an opinion that I disagree with, you're still entitled to express that opinion. And I feel what some companies are trying to do if they don't like this opinion is basically it's like this shadow banning. So like, they don't block your account, but they kind of like don't really show it. Because the thing is like, there's a ranking algorithm as a newsfeed, So it's like, they don't show it as much. So in that regard, it's kind of like, you're putting definitely the company in a hard position of how to kind of like deal with this, although they are trying not to take positions overall. Again, government regulation besides, and which is hard, even that is hard to do, besides like the obvious fake news, there's nothing much that you can do about that without kind of like coming in and say, hey, this opinion cannot be done or cannot be said or cannot be shown, which goes again as kind of like the fundamentals of our democracy in a way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think the thing that I find particularly challenging about this situation is that I think that and this goes back to some of the stuff we were talking about ISIS a few minutes ago, that there is a fun to be had on these social media platforms, that and the play that is on offer there, which is takes all forms, social play, different kinds of like identity performance, just messing around, killing time, all the kinds of things we do on social media. Like that's what draws people into that place. And then that is what being in that place is what makes them manipulable subjects, So is maybe a potential solution just simply making things that are a better draw, that draw more people, that offer different kinds of or richer kinds of play than are currently on offer in social media.
So like I actually have a point regarding this and like the comment you said earlier and your comment as well, which is okay, that at the end of the day when basically this news feed kind of started, you want to give people what, in a way, how the algorithm works, what they want to see and what people like them are actually been viewing, so you give them the same kind of material. So what was this happening was, If you are, conservative, you're liberal, you're actually being shown, the stuff that you would like. So this what's been like happening overall. But there's now kind of like a move to kind of like, okay, we cannot just do like a simplistic machine learning approach. Simplistic machine learning approach is like, if you like stuff, as in you engage with it, you spend a lot of time looking at it, you click on it, I'll just show you more of that. This is what's happening. So there was no kind of like repressing on the ranking algorithm, stuff like that, happening much before like 2016. But like right now, it's like, okay, are we just gonna continue doing so, or are we gonna go in and try to change how this actually is working? And there's just like, and to be frank, on that point, I feel sympathetic, sometimes like with some of the internet companies. It's like, where should you draw the line? It's you being criticized from both sides.
Yeah.
Like as of right now, you're being criticized from like basically liberals of like, hey, you're letting misinformation, and you're being criticized by conservatives saying you're limiting us on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with government not also like saying much, and actually the government itself is being divided on what internet companies should be doing.
I think one thing it's done is it's brought to the fore the fact that they are doing social engineering.
They are,
that
yeah.
they always have been doing
Yeah,
social engineering, and now the fact that in some ways there's maybe this push to pull people out of these kind of atomized silos that they've been algorithmically put into is making people conscious of the fact that they have been sorted in those ways. But yeah, it's a very tricky problem. How do you back out of that once you've done that? Sometimes I think of the internet almost as a kind of distilling, like a still or an alembic that sorts and atomizes people by bringing them together into, it's sort of a paradox. It tears us apart by bringing us together.
Actually, like, this problem is not only on like social networks, it's all over the place. So let's say like Google search engine, you put in, this is actually like a real issue we had, but without mentioning details. Like let's say females from a certain gender, from a certain race group. You put in, and the images comes have like certain connotation. And like, why these certain connotation actually like shows up? Because people who put in this like search words click on those. So you get the result that people like you, not like you, like, people with the same, like, features as you, like, actually engage with. So should you go in and give the people the result as they want, or you should go in and say, I want to give something different except if you specify. So, and this, like, an ongoing issue is like how overall machine learning frameworks work. It's like, I give you what you and people like you have been engaging with. Should I do that all the time, or sometimes should I come in and do social engineering?
Right, yes. Yeah.
So,
for your own good, I'm going to show you this thing I know you won't like.
Yeah. So, or should I show you both, or, and should as a company, like, I go in and do that? Should the government tell me that? Should be like the social consensus? It's, yeah. And I feel like a lot of fingers are being pointed at the companies too. Sometimes I feel like it's almost like a societal issue overall, like, but it's really kind of like a mirror of our problems.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. More questions? Saw some hands. Yeah.
But for Google, I think, and like other social media websites, I think it's also an issue of revenue, correct? Because the information you're sending to people, like both in their searches and in their advertisements, both also come from information that Google wants. So do you think that like curbing the amount of information Google is allowed to disseminate to advertisers, or Google is allowed to keep on them for themselves, would stop like tribalism between like liberals and conservatives?
That's a great point, and actually not only relates to like liberal and conservative. So we have basically advertisers. At the end of the day, like a few years ago, 89% of Google's money, for example, came from ads. So ads, is the main venue for most of these companies. And advertisers sometimes like need certain things. So they actually like this correlation between that group and this product. They have no problem putting this group under this category because, it makes money. It makes it easier to kind of like, send this kind of ads. And to certain times, particularly when a company is starting, it's like, you definitely do what advertisers, kind of want you to do because you need to make money. So, but at a certain point, you kind of like, okay, I can lose money, but like I want to kind of like, for example, debias like the internet or these kind of like projects. So a lot of companies are finding like optimal points of like maybe sometimes not making the advertisers happy, but doing like what they perceive to be the right thing, but not definitely all the way, because like, it's you need to still like make money. So it's an ongoing like finding that optimal point for companies. And what I've seen this was like Twitter and Facebook, for example, closing so many accounts. Like Twitter have closed like 15-20% of like basic accounts, and all of it was like bots or trolls or things of the sort. So that's not good for business. But they finally like said like, okay, we need to do this. And same thing was like Facebook and all of the measures they were trying to do, and they took a hit in the stock market for it. Yeah. So, but they can take a hit now.
Yeah, they can afford to lose a little
They can
bit.
afford a hit.
Yeah. Any other questions from the room? Yeah.
I want to ask, we're talking very specifically about a problem that's come up with the age of the internet, and I wanted to ask you if you feel like there's something specifically about the internet that causes this to happen more or in a different way, or do you think that this is something that was also a problem with print media before the age of the internet that's simply on a bigger scale now?
There are definitely similarities, but for me, like the big difference is the personalization. So like pinpointing, and this is like a real byproduct of like machine learning frameworks. So before it's like, okay, there are certain mediums that you would read if you believe in certain things or part of like a group or whatever, and there's other mediums. But like right now, I'm pinpointing at you. I'm like knowing everything that you like and people like you likes. I'm just gonna give you the stuff that reinforces your beliefs. You can live your life and not only kind of like, okay, read a paper that says what you think is right, but also showing people, on your feed and that you interact with, showing the same thing. You live sometimes like ending up living in a world that's like, oh yeah, my opinions make sense. Everybody is kind of like doing the thing that I'm doing, and it's like I'm right. So yeah, so in that regard, I see a difference.
Yeah, I remember seeing a presentation from one of the principals at Cambridge Analytica, just going through all the ways that they would target people, get all this really granular information about individuals, and then that would be mapped to this sort of psychographic research that they had, so that it wouldn't just be the content, but it would even be things like the color of the advertisement, and the font used, and the size of the font. And all those things would be algorithmically dealt out to these individuals to hit them in an optimally effective way. So it wasn't just the message, but also even the form of the message being algorithmically determined, which seems to portend some futures that are kind of alarming. What are you most alarmed about when it comes to the future?
Be frank is like, and this is, it's related to the IS, but also like, goes beyond the IS and like across a lot of different countries. It's kind of a little bit like sad that what you see in a lot of countries right now, the internet is becoming just like a closed like river within that country. So I think I was talking to you about this, that like a lot of governments have like learned, like pretty much from their mistakes. And what they're doing right now is like, if you post something they don't like, you're present. There's people that I know, some of them personally, I'm not like, just know of them. It was like 3 years later, like, like government in Turkey or like government in Egypt, they go and arrest you for like a tweet that you have put. Like literally, there are some people in Turkey that have been arrested for tweets they have put like 3 years ago. And like, and definitely from looking back from like, the Arab Spring and like, Twitter and Facebook being a medium for democracy, you have basically a proof for what you have said like years back and being used against you. So it's kind of a little bit sad to see that what, the internet is, kind of like converting into like just like almost like territorial waters. Mm-hmm. So like, my country controls this part of the internet and like it all controls this part of the internet, and it's not what's meant to be. So.
It's not that sort of borderless utopia of ideas that we were
saying
told it might be. Yeah.
It's a little bit naive, but like on the other hand, kind of like being compartmentalized in that way, and it's definitely sad to see.
Yeah, and so your sense is that sort of territorialization is just
really
going to
growing.
continue. Yeah,
it's really growing.
Well, a couple more questions.
You said that people are becoming more sophisticated in their use of imagery. And one of the things that I notice, I wonder if you could comment back at me, is that, again, we wish to believe what we want to believe. So an image may be real, like not an edited or made up image, but it may be taken from someplace else. So, for example, let's say somebody wants to say that this teenage boy died in a battle in Libya or something today, but they actually take a photo of somebody of a similar age group that was killed in a battle in Iraq or something 3 weeks ago or 2 years ago. And to the average person, if they want to believe that that person was shot down by the government's military, they believe it because it looks like they don't search it further.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a brown boy that was somewhere between the age of 12 and 18, got shot, and that passes good enough for me. And it's retweeted immediately and it goes viral among that group of people that's interested in that particular cause or that particular battle. Is it often a real photo, like that's been stolen from another battle?
It happens all the time, like grabbing photos from even 3 years ago and 5 years ago. It doesn't even have to be within a year and being used in a different context. It's something that definitely a lot of from bots to trolls do it all the time. So
But even
The White House just did it the other day. Yeah.
even if somebody is not a bot or a troll, let's say
normal user.
somebody has, yes, because a lot of normal users are still very, very active retweeters on the subjects that they care about passionately. So let's say, for example, you could have a Pakistani account or something that's bot-ish, that seems entirely dedicated only to attacking Indians that believe that Kashmir and Ladakh should belong to India. And the account seems to be devoted to that and nothing else. But most are not like that. Most might be, a Pakistani who says, I love cricket and I'm getting my master's in engineering, and on the weekend I like taking long walks in the Himalayas and feeling the wind blow through my hair, and only part of their thing is devoted to tweeting how awful Indians are and blah, 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 Kashmir. But whenever the opportunity comes their way, if they see something like that come through their feed, they nevertheless don't ignore it. This is an important subject to them, and they will still retweet it without looking to see, did the incident actually occur, or even though this is my side, the incident did not occur.
It happens. Definitely. Is your question that people do it without knowing, or is it used intentionally for?
It's that when a person or an account, it's a real person, and they appear to be a well-rounded person,
Sure.
and often they're educated. We like to say that people that we don't agree with are morons or idiots, or you can go more severe on your insults. But often people who we disagree with may not be idiots. Like that guy in Pakistan may actually be or female even, can actually be a very smart, educated person who disagrees with the Indian person on the other side, who is also very smart and educated. And these accounts are not going to get shut down. They're avid retweet. You can be smart, but you can still retweet information that's a lie.
Is there a specific question? Because we should probably move on to
It's
the
that
rest of it.
what do we do when smart people retweet things that are lies? Smart, real, actual people who are not bots are frequent retweeters
I've
of
done it.
lies.
I've retweeted stuff that I've later found to be inaccurate information or wrong. What should I do when I do that?
Well,
Hang my head in shame.
we can all pretty much sometimes think something is true and we share it once or things of the sort. But if you constantly, the thing is this is like a one point kind of thing. Well, if you're constantly sharing stuff that's not true, but let's say from users that
But you wish to believe it's true, and so
sure, but
you believe it's true.
sure, but from users that are do this for a living, a lot of times platform like Twitter or Facebook, so sort already would have stopped this kind of accounts, or they can even send you a message that hey, and they have done this with the Russian trolls that hey, you interacted with Russian trolls, and sometimes we give you okay on this part or this time things of sort. So there are different ways a company can approach this. One, if you are always posting fake news, yeah, you might get stopped. It's but in the beginning, if you basically just sharing things from fake bots or bad use or things of the sort, or from a user that was closed, they can give you hey, there have been a bot or a troll that you have been interacting with. So, and you can even give warnings, for example, that you have been sharing a lot of fake news that these are not true. But
So
if you continue doing so, yeah, you might get stopped.
So I can see it coming down to trust and the trust of the companies. That this message I've received alerting me that this is fake news. I believe that message, and I think that's sort of what I find most intractable about this crisis right now around facticity and where is the sort of ground truth that we can all agree on. And I think it's almost like we're at a point of polarization in this country where any claim to the truth is automatically read as some kind of political initiative. And yeah, maybe I'll let you close out with where do you see hope in the next 5 or 6 years for us all around this kind of issue? Because I think a lot of us are I'm just sort of super concerned about this stuff. So yeah, I'm hoping you can give me some reason to feel good.
I guess I'll give more of a neutral comment that I really believe that it's a lot of the problems that you find online is again a byproduct of what's happening in society. So if American society overall becomes less polarized or the political discourse in this country gets better, I do believe that it will get better on the online platforms as well. But if not, you'll continue to have the same problems online, and you will have the opportunities for external and internal users to use it to their benefit. So.
Great. So any last questions for Adam? If not, let's hear it for Adam. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a really great conversation, and you're welcome to come anytime.
Sure.
Play with our toys. Thank you all for coming.